She stood there with that smug smile holding a bright yellow paper in her hand. "You've been fined $250,000, she said like she just won the lottery. I stared at her, trying not to laugh. "For what?" I asked. She tilted her sunglasses and pointed at my fence. "Unauthorized construction, landscaping violation, and that ugly truck in your driveway." My truck. The one I used to build half the houses around here. I told her calmly, "Ma'am, this is my property. HOA rules don't apply here." But she smirked, the kind of smirk that made your blood boil. "Everything inside Maple Ridge belongs to us now," she said. "You signed the contract when you bought the lot. Except I didn't buy it, I built it, years ago before any HOA ever existed." She walked off, heels clicking on my gravel driveway, shouting over her shoulder, "Pay the fine or we'll take the house." I watched her go, shaking my head. Something felt off. There was no way she had that kind of authority. I'd been in enough board meetings, signed enough deeds to know she was bluffing. But when I checked my mailbox later that day, there were official-looking letters, HOA letterhead, lawyer stamps, even a court notice. For a second it looked real, too real. My stomach turned. Either this woman was crazier than I thought, or someone was trying to take what was mine. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county records. What I saw made my hands freeze on the keyboard. The land titles, they were all under one name. Mine. Every house, every street, every patch of grass in Maple Ridge legally registered to me. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming. "You want to find me for my own land?" I whispered. "All right, let's play." The next morning I woke up to loud banging on my front door. Not the friendly kind, this was the kind that made your chest tighten. When I opened it, there she was again, Karen, standing proud with two men in cheap uniforms behind her. "Sir," one of them barked, "we're here to enforce an HOA order. You need to vacate the premises immediately." I almost laughed. The uniforms looked off, bad stitching, fake badges, and one of them even had his name tag crooked. Karen crossed her arms. "You thought you could ignore the fines," she said. "These officers will escort you out while we inspect your property." I stepped forward, calm but firm. "You sure you want to do that?" She blinked, confused. I pointed at her officers. "Because impersonating law enforcement is a federal crime." One of the fake cops shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the other. Karen snapped, "Don't listen to him, he's just a contractor, he doesn't know the law." I smiled. "Actually," I said slowly, "I helped write some of it." Her face froze. Before she could react, I pulled out my phone and hit play on a security feed. The footage showed her and her officers sneaking onto my property the night before, taking pictures and tapping fake violation notices to my fence. Her jaw dropped. "You recorded us?" she stammered. I nodded. "Every camera on this land belongs to me, just like the land itself." She tried to recover, snapping at her fake cops. "Arrest him!" she yelled, but they didn't move. One of them sighed, took off his fake badge, and said quietly, "Ma'am, I'm done. You said this was just a neighborhood dispute." Then he walked off. The other followed. Karen's face turned red. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I looked her dead in the eye. "You're right," I said, "neither do you." Because what she didn't know was that I hadn't just built this neighborhood. I owned the company that created the HOA itself. Karen wasn't the type to back down. That same evening I saw her packing outside my property line, phone glued to her ear, talking fast and angry. By nightfall she'd rallied a small group of HOA board members, 3 men in polo shirts and fake confidence. They stood on the sidewalk, pointing toward my house like I was some sort of criminal. I stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. "You all lost," I called out. Karen's voice carried sharp through the air. "We voted to terminate your residency within Maple Ridge. You'll receive formal eviction papers in the morning." The men behind her nodded like trained parrots. One even started recording me like he expected I'd lash out, but instead I just smiled. "You're trespassing on private property," I said, "and since you love paper so much, maybe you should read the one that actually matters." I walked down the steps and handed her a file. Inside were the original development documents, signed, stamped, and dated, listing my company as the founder, landowner, and sole authority to transfer rights. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages. This can't be right," she whispered. "We bought this land years ago." "No," I said quietly, "you bought the houses, the land, the roads, the ponds, all leased from my corporation." I paused, letting the silence hang. "And that lease, it expired 6 months ago." For the first time, Karen didn't speak. The board members looked uneasy. One of them leaned over and muttered, "Karen, what did you get us into?" She snapped the file shut and glared at me, trying to regain control. "You won't get away with this," she spat. "We'll go public, we'll ruin your name." I nodded slowly. "You can try, but make sure you spell it right, because once I file the revocation notice tomorrow, everything in Maple Ridge technically becomes abandoned property." Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to respond, but I'd already turned back toward the house. Behind me, I heard one of the men whisper, "Did he just say he owns everything?" "Yeah, I did." That night, the neighborhood went quiet, too quiet. Even the usual dog barks and late-night sprinklers were gone. I was sitting in my workshop checking through old files when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my security system. "Front gate movement detected." When I switched to the live feed, my chest tightened. Karen was there again, but this time she wasn't alone. A tow truck idled behind her, headlights cutting through the fog, and two men in hoodies were walking around my driveway, shining flashlights on my truck and garage. I stepped outside, calm but cold. "You planning to rob me or just harass me again?" I called out. Karen spun around, waving a clipboard. "This property is now under HOA repossession," she shouted. "We're seizing assets for unpaid fines." The tow truck driver looked uncertain. "Ma'am, you sure about this?" he asked. "The guy said he owns the place." Karen snapped. "Do I look unsure? Hook it up." I took a slow step forward. "Touch that truck," I said evenly, "and you'll regret it." One of the men laughed. "What are you gonna do, call the cops?" I smiled faintly. "No," I said, pulling out my phone. "They're already watching." The second I hit play, the projector on my porch flickered to life, showing a live stream. Karen and her little crew caught red-handed on camera. And not just mine. The footage was being streamed to my lawyer's office and the sheriff's department. Karen's expression twisted when she realized it. "You can't, this is illegal," she shouted. I raised an eyebrow. "Illegal? You just tried to steal my truck off my own land." Then came the sound I'd been waiting for, sirens in the distance. Karen froze. The tow truck driver jumped back in his cab and drove off without a word. The two men ran. She stood there alone, shaking, clutching that clipboard like it was a shield. As the red and blue lights lit up the street, she whispered, "You set me up." I looked at her, calm and steady. "No, Karen," I said, "you did that all by yourself." Back and index pointing right. The real cops pulled up fast, three cruisers, lights flashing, tires crunching against the gravel. The air buzzed with tension. Karen stood frozen by my gate, her confidence draining with every flashing light. One officer stepped out, hand resting on his holster. "Sir, we got a report of a property dispute," he said. "You the homeowner?" Before I could answer, Karen jumped in, desperate. "He's not, he's a trespasser and he's been threatening me. He even hacked our HOA files." Her voice cracked halfway through. The officer glanced between us, unimpressed. "Ma'am, do you have any proof of ownership?" She pulled out that same fake folder again, the one I'd already seen her use to bully half the neighborhood. The cop skimmed it, then looked up at me. "Sir, what's your name?" I told him. His expression shifted. "Wait, you're Jonathan Cole." Karen frowned. "Who the hell is Jonathan Cole?" The officer turned to her, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, this man's name is on the county deed. He's not just a homeowner, he's the registered founder of Maple Ridge Estates." Her mouth fell open. "That's impossible, he's lying." I didn't say a word. I just walked back inside for a moment, returned with a thick binder and handed it over. Inside were notarized contracts, tax records, and the original land grant, every page stamped with official seals. The officer nodded slowly, flipping through it. "Everything checks out," he said finally. Then he turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, do you realize you've been issuing fines and notices on land that isn't even under your authority?" Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. "That can't be." The other officers stepped in, one holding a small body cam that had caught everything: the fake cops, the false repossession, the trespassing. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're coming with us." Karen's face went pale as they cuffed her. "This isn't over," she screamed as they led her to the car. "You'll lose everything." I watched her go, the flashing lights fading down the street. The whole neighborhood peeked out from their windows, whispering. When it finally went quiet again, I looked up at the sky and exhaled. "All that noise just to learn who really owns the ground they walk on," I muttered. But deep down, I knew this wasn't finished yet, because Karen wasn't the only one who'd been pulling strings. Someone bigger had been backing her, someone from inside the county office. 2 days passed, but peace didn't last. My phone buzzed nonstop, lawyers calling, reporters asking questions, neighbors apologizing. Everyone suddenly wanted to be on my good side, but something didn't add up. Karen had been bold, reckless, too reckless for a simple HOA chairwoman. Someone had been feeding her power. That suspicion turned into proof when I received an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just a single flash drive inside. I plugged it into my computer, half expecting a virus. Instead, a folder popped up labeled HOA Internal. Inside were dozens of emails between Karen and a man named Deputy Commissioner Reed. The messages were shocking. Reed had been selling access to county land records, letting Karen manipulate ownership details to squeeze money out of homeowners. The plan was simple: fine people for fake violations, collect the cash, and update the records to make them think they didn't own their land anymore. I leaned back, heart pounding. This wasn't just an HOA scam, it was a county-level fraud ring. That night I drove to City Hall. The place was half empty, but Reed's office light was still on. Through the glass I saw him, mid-50s, expensive suit, confidence dripping off him. When I walked in, he didn't even look surprised. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said. "Karen talked too much, didn't she?" "She talked enough," I replied, "enough to take you down." He laughed, slow and smug. "You think anyone's gonna believe you? You're just some builder with a grudge. I've got judges, politicians, and cops who owe me favors." I dropped a small black device on his desk. "Then you might want to tell them to smile," I said, "because this room's been recording since I walked in." His grin vanished. "You bugged my office." "No," I said, tapping the pen in my hand. "Your security system did." He turned pale. He knew what that meant. His own system had logged every illegal file transfer, every fake deed, every message. I leaned closer. "You tried to steal my land, my work, my neighborhood, but you made one mistake: you forgot who built your security network." Reed stood up, trying to bluff. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I already did," I interrupted. "By morning, those files will be in the hands of the state auditor." For the first time, he looked scared. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Karen was just the mask," I said. "You were the face behind it, but I'm done playing your game." As I walked out, my phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "You don't know what you've started." I stared at it for a long moment, then I typed back one line. "I didn't start it, I'm ending it." By sunrise, the whole thing had blown wide open. News vans lined the entrance to Maple Ridge, reporters shouting questions over one another. Words like fraud, corruption, and property theft flashed across every screen. My name was everywhere, but this time not as a suspect, as a whistleblower. Karen's mugshot was already trending online, but what really shocked people was the second headline: "Deputy Commissioner Arrested in HOA Land Fraud Scandal." Turns out, once the files hit the state auditor's desk, the FBI moved faster than anyone expected. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching as neighbors slowly gathered. People who wouldn't even wave before were now walking up with nervous smiles. "We had no idea," one man said. "We thought she was working with the city." Another woman, the one Karen used to bully over her garden, whispered, "She fined me for planting sunflowers. I thought I'd lose my home." I told them all the same thing: "You didn't lose it, you never could. This land belongs to the people who live on it, not the ones who fake control." By afternoon, the county issued an emergency statement dissolving the Maple Ridge HOA entirely. Every bogus fine revoked, every record restored. The neighborhood cheered, but in the middle of the noise, I kept my eyes on one black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. I walked toward it slowly. The driver rolled the window down just enough for me to see a man in a dark suit. "Not Reed, someone else." "You made powerful enemies," he said quietly. "You should have just taken the fine." I leaned in closer. "I don't take threats on my land." He smirked. "Then you'd better guard it well. There's more than one Reed out there." The SUV pulled away before I could answer. For a second, I just stood there, feeling that strange mix of victory and warning in the air. The neighborhood was free, but I could feel it. This wasn't over. Something bigger was coming, something that reached beyond Karen and her fake HOA. I turned back toward my house looking over the place I'd built with my own hands. They thought they could own me, I muttered, half smiling, but I own the ground they're standing on. A week later, the quiet finally returned. No flashing lights, no reporters, no Karen screaming at my gate. Just the sound of the wind brushing through the trees I'd planted 20 years ago. For the first time in months, Maple Ridge felt like a neighborhood again, kids playing, families grilling, people waving instead of whispering. I sat on the same porch where it all began, watching the sunset melt across the sky. Part of me still couldn't believe how close I'd come to losing everything I'd built. Not because I didn't pay attention, but because I trusted the system to be fair. It was, but I'd learned something: you can't fake ownership of what a man built with his own hands. A familiar car slowed in front of my driveway, a sheriff's cruiser. The door opened and Officer Daniels, the same one who'd cuffed Karen that night, stepped out with a small envelope. "Thought you want to see this," he said, handing it over. Inside was a court order, official confirmation that every inch of Maple Ridge had been transferred back under my control. No more loopholes, no more fraud, just the truth in black and white. "Looks like it's finally over," I said. He nodded. "You know, not many people would have stood up to them, most just pay the fine and move on." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, but some of us fought for this country so nobody could take our land or our freedom with a fake piece of paper." He chuckled. "Guess you showed them." As he drove away, I looked over at the neighborhood one last time. The fences were still crooked, the lawns uneven, but they were ours. Real, honest. My phone buzzed with one last message from an unknown number. "Karen took the fall, Reed's gone, but we're still watching." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Whatever came next, I was ready. I took a slow breath and looked at the flag waving above my porch. "They can watch all they want," I murmured, "because I'm not giving up 1 inch of what's mine." Then I walked back inside, lights flickering behind me, the sound of the gate creaking shut, like the chapter finally closing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt since all this began: peace. I didn't fight for this land to be told I can't live on it. I fought for it so no one else ever could.